Today, you can steal my exact strategy for how I'm marketing my small business on social media and why we're showing up on certain platforms like YouTube and Instagram and not other platforms like TikTok, and basically how all the different types of content we're creating fits into our overall marketing strategy because there is intention and strategy behind all the types of content that we're making. So let's go ahead and jump into it. First off, let's break off the 4 main types of attributes of different platforms that you could be showing up on right now. So the first one is thinking about platforms you own versus platforms you don't own. And I bring this up just because it's really important to make sure at least one type of content that you are consistently creating is on a platform that you own. So whether that is preferably your email list is like the biggest one here, but it could also be a blog or something along those lines if you want it to be. But I always encourage my students and just small business owners in general to make sure that at least one platform that you're consistently creating for is a platform that you own, because newsflash, a lot of these platforms we don't own. And so something could happen to our account, something could happen to the platform itself, and we could literally lose everything that we've built worked so hard to build on those platforms. So make sure you have a platform that you own, that no matter what happens, that you own it and you own those subscribers or whatever it is. The second thing to think about is reaching a cold versus warm audience type of content. Okay, so what do I mean by this? So there are certain types of content that you could be sharing online that the primary goal is more towards reaching a cold audience, and there's some types of content that the goal is reaching a warm audience. And this can be mostly different platform by platform, but even within some platforms, there can be types of content you share on the platform that is for your warm audience versus types of content that's for a cold audience. So let's use Instagram as an example. So Instagram, it does a really good job of incorporating different types of content in the sense of you can reach a cold audience really, really fast with something like Instagram Reels. You can also nurture your warm audience really, really well with something like Instagram Stories, right? Those two do very different things on Instagram and reach very different types of people and have very different roles within the app. This can even look like, a TikTok versus YouTube, for example. So TikTok is very, very focused on reaching a cold audience. It's very easy to go viral on TikTok and reach people that do not own you do not follow you. And it's harder to, for a follower to see all of your content in their feed, if that makes sense. Versus YouTube does a very good job. Wait, why was I comparing these two platforms? YouTube does not necessarily reach a warm audience. I don't know why I was comparing it to TikTok. So I guess on the flip side of that would be an email list. So email marketing is very much for your warm audience. When you send an email out, it's to people who already know you and have subscribed to you. It's not to people who don't know you. YouTube would be another example of a cold audience. So it would be content more geared towards reaching people who do not already know your name, do not know your business, and getting new leads in the door, essentially. YouTube does a really good job of that because it essentially is a search engine. It is the second largest search engine behind Google, and Google owns YouTube, right? So it's really important to make sure that you're thinking about this in terms of the content you're creating, that you have a mixture of reaching a cold audience, like new people, especially if you sell digital products or physical products or something that's a little more scalable. Reaching a lot of new people is really important for that to keep scaling versus a warm audience. I would say that's even more important for also people who have scalable products, but even for service-based businesses, you might even be focusing more on warm content and really nurturing the people who already follow you, because you don't need a large volume of customers. You just need the right customers, right? Okay, so the third thing to think about when it comes to the main types of content that you're creating is evergreen content. Evergreen content is so important. I think that it's really overlooked by a lot of business owners, and we know it's important, that it can be really impactful, but not a lot of us are actually willing to put in the effort and the time to build evergreen content. So when we're thinking about evergreen content, this is content that typically it's longer to build, but longer to last, okay? So this is something like, for example, a YouTube channel. It might take you a year or longer to build a YouTube channel that's actually going to gain you views and make an impact for your revenue, right? But once you start gaining those views and YouTube starts ranking your videos in search, recommending it to other people on YouTube, the snowball effect from there is just insane. And that snowball lasts forever. That hill just keeps going on and on and on. It's really hard to make it stop. even when you take a break from YouTube. So it's not something like Instagram where if you don't show up, like you're probably not going to make sales or reach new people. Like you have to consistently show up on Instagram in order to do that versus YouTube. Like I have videos from years ago, like 2-3 years ago that I created that are still reaching people and getting people onto my email list. And that just doesn't happen on something with more short form content like Instagram, for instance. And so it is something though, again, like it's going to take longer to build. And I think that's where the big hang up is. Like it is a lot of time and energy. Typically the actual content does take more time, effort, thought, even maybe a team behind you to help create that content. If it's something like a podcast or a YouTube channel, but it's going to last a really long time. And it's also a great way to create depth with your audience and to go deeper and to explain things deeper, to share more about you in something like a long form piece of content that is typically evergreen, which kind of moves me into the fourth thing with the main types of content that we are sharing that I recommend for you to think about sharing is having a long form foundational piece of content. So within all of that, think about, again, a long form piece of content, usually it's going to be more evergreen. It's probably going to reach more of a cold audience versus that short form content. And so when you're creating that content, think about how you can have one piece of content every week that is like your foundational piece of content where then you can create a lot of short form pieces of content off of. So for example, back when I first started my business as a photographer, this looked a lot like creating one blog post that's like a written long form piece of content, turning that blog post into multiple Instagram captions and sharing that on my stories and sharing that to my email list. Like it gave me some great short form pieces of content that I could share to my audience without having to rethink and working smarter and not harder. Another example of how that works for me today is with, this YouTube channel that you're listening to, or if you're listening on the podcast, we take this long form piece of content that we're filming for both the podcast and the YouTube at the same time. We can turn this into YouTube shorts, into short Instagram reels, into sharing about it on stories, we even take the outlines I create for these episodes and make reels off of them and other types of content. We have a copywriter who takes the episodes and turns them into a blog post that's optimized for SEO. And we drive thousands of views every month from our blog to our YouTube channel and our website. So just thinking about how you can, like something that can help to have more structure and organization to your content, and thinking about, those first three things is having that long form piece of content that you create every week. You make sure without a doubt, like you're going to create that, because if you create that, you have so much short form content you can create off of that. And not only that, you could have a team use that to create other short form content where you don't have to have your hand in every piece of content you're creating for your business. And that can just be a game changer. Okay, so with all of these four things in mind, here is a little bit of a more detailed look. These are all the things that I'm thinking about as I'm creating our content strategy and the way I'm marketing myself online. So this can look different for every person as far as how you apply this. But if you want to steal the way that I'm doing it right now, here's exactly where we are at with our content and what is working well for us. So the platform that we own is our email list. It's like the main thing. We also have a blog, and we've had that for a long time. Like I mentioned, we drive upwards of 25,000 plus views a month. We actually have I believe it's just a YouTube video on this. So we'll put a link in the description, show notes, if you want to head over to that video afterward and get a little bit more of an idea of how we're doing that, because that's a little more visual and I show you a lot of stuff on the screen and stuff. So email list and blog, we have that. Reaching a cold audience, we use Instagram in the form of Instagram Reels and some type of short form content. And we use our YouTube and our blog as more of a long form evergreen type of content to reach a cold audience consistently. Again, like we're doing a lot of that through YouTube search and then through like Google SEO. People are finding the blog posts from these YouTube videos / podcast episodes through our blog. Okay, and then how are we serving our warm audience? That's more through our podcast. And we have like those podcast only episodes go up. And just I know the people who typically tune into a podcast versus YouTube, a lot more of you guys are like our people and our like inner circle of people versus people who stumble upon us on YouTube. Not to say if you're watching this on YouTube and you are a long-term like member person in our community, like that can totally happen. But just seeing views and analytics and stuff, podcast is a lot more of our warm audience. We aren't necessarily going to reach new people really quickly outside of our current audience through a podcast specifically. Like just the way those platforms are set up just isn't set up to do that. We also are nurturing our warm audience through Instagram stories, and our email list is also nurturing our warm audience. Our long form foundational piece of content that a lot of our other content comes off of is our YouTube/podcast episodes. So currently we're testing this out. This might change again in the future. We'll split it off, but we're doing most of our foundational long form piece of content goes both on the podcast and YouTube. So if you're listening on the podcast, there's a video version of this episode on YouTube. If you're listening on YouTube, there's a podcast only version of this episode, which is kind of nice if you want to finish it on the go or whatever, or if you want to watch the video version of this podcast episode. But anyways, so we take that one long form foundational piece of content and it goes from the YouTube and podcast. So it gets pushed on those two platforms and then it gets created into a blog post. From there, we usually share new episodes on our email list every week, or it gets turned into an email we'll send out in the future through a nurture sequence. From there, we take the outline we created for that episode. So I put a lot of thought and intention into these outlines, and it's where a lot of just my thoughts and brain dumps go into where I want to put into episodes. And that will then get turned into Instagram reels or Instagram captions or things I want to share about on stories. If we're trying to come up with ideas for that, I'll simply go to hey, what did I create for the YouTube video or podcast from last week? And I'll take that outline and turn it into a short Instagram reel, really break down, or just take one of the points that I talked about, turn that into an Instagram reel. Or even I mentioned earlier, literally taking the edited video from YouTube, turning those into YouTube shorts. Really great way to repurpose. We've done a good job of doing that for YouTube. We haven't repurposed a lot onto Reels yet, but I want to experiment with that more soon. We then take a lot of that content, so whether it's linked to blog posts, even our email list freebies, Instagram Reels, we've been putting a lot of those onto Pinterest lately. Which actually, quick plug here, my sister Jennifer actually started a Pinterest agency. So if you're someone who's looking for someone to help with your Pinterest, she's been doing an amazing job and has been very intentional with the way she's created things. We've seen a lot of great results as far as a lot of reach for my business on Pinterest, which has been awesome, and incorporating a lot of video content there as well. So if you're looking for someone to help you with Pinterest, I'll put a link to her agency in the description, show notes. You can check her out, reach out. We've been working together for 3 or 4 months now, and she's been doing an awesome job. And truly, she learned so much about Pinterest and what's working right now. She knows way more than I do about Pinterest. So she's been able to really take what we're already doing, run with it on Pinterest, which has just been awesome. Another thing I wanted to mention here. Okay, so basically that's an overview of our content, what is working for us right now as far as our marketing. And I also wanted to mention that to push all of this content out every week, I always get a lot of questions, especially with working with a team, how in the world are you pushing this content out, getting it out into front of people? What does that workflow look like? And specifically with creating the long form content, so what I'm doing right now, in recording this episode, is I block off, usually it's half a workday for me, it's 3 or 4 hours, which is actually not even quite half, but I guess with getting my hair and makeup done, it'd be about half a workday, 4 hours. I usually can film 4 or 5 of these episodes in about 3 hours is how it takes me, plus an hour for prep, getting ready, all of that. So in about 4 hours, I can record 4 or 5 of these videos, a month's worth. And then from there, we have a Trello board with workflows upon workflows and assigning it to different team members so that everybody can see that one Trello board and see a checklist of all the to-dos for every single piece of content. So for me, I really just have to record these episodes once a month, and then my team takes care of a lot of it from there. So I prep the outlines, I record it, and then they take care of Michael, my husband, takes care of editing, and then we have Maggie who schedules everything, Christina, our copywriter for the blog, and then from there we take all of that and we're communicating about who needs to do what and what every piece of content is where in the process on our Trello board. And we actually sell our content calendar templates in the shop. So if you're curious, if you want to download them for yourself, they are a really fast, easy download. We have a video tutorial that comes with that on how to use it, but we have it for any piece of content that you're wondering, email list, podcast, YouTube, all of that. There's a version of that in within the content calendar template. So we'll have a link in the description and show notes if you want to check that out as well. It's seriously it's in the free program Trello, and I can't rave enough about Trello and just being able to use a board like that to not only stay on top of it for me and my to-dos, but for our team to have a list of everything they need to do for each video. And so nothing slips through the cracks, and it's just been awesome for planning out content. So another thing I wanted to address here when it comes to our social media marketing plan, and the plan that I have laid out is, you might have noticed, we don't post on TikTok. That might come as a surprise to you, especially because I like TikTok. I love using it as a consumer. I don't very often because otherwise I would waste way too much time on there. But I do have my select, I'll go on there, my select 4 or 5 creators that I'll always go and check out the new videos that they've posted. But I just wanted to address, for my business, we don't post actively on TikTok. I do have a personal brand that grew to over 100,000 followers on TikTok. As far as my family life and personal life, I did grow an account based around that. But for business stuff, we don't post on TikTok. There's a couple of reasons why. One, we don't need to show up on every platform to be effective, okay? So this is a permission slip for you. Don't feel like you have to show up on every new platform. We have decided TikTok's just not a priority for us right now. We don't really feel like that's where our ideal audience is. Obviously, our audience is on TikTok, but we know that we want to put our efforts into Instagram and YouTube right now, and that's okay. That's where we want to put our focus. And so we just don't have the capacity with our team to show up on another platform right now, and that is okay. And we have decided that for us, Instagram and Instagram Reels with short form video is really where we want to put our focus. And we also, with long form content, want to put our focus on YouTube. And that's just what we're doing right now. And it's working for us. Maybe in the future, we'll add it in if we want to. But for now, we've just decided as from the business side of things, not personal brand stuff, that we are just focusing on what is working really well for us right now and is actually reaching our people most effectively. And for us, that means not showing up on every single platform. And I also wanted to mention here too, if you are someone who also wants to put a focus on growing with Reels and short form content, and you feel like that's where your people are at, we do have a free Reels class, basically about how to grow your reach, followers, and customers with Reels. We'll have a link in the description in the show notes. It's a free 1-hour class all about how to do just that. And we are up to and I mentioned that too because we split off and created a separate business education account on Instagram for business side of things because my personal brand grew so fast, and we are up to over 8,000 followers on that account. Over 6,000 of those followers came in just this year alone. So these strategies are what are working right now for us. We are actively implementing them, seeing really fast growth on Instagram. And so if you're also wanting to see that type of growth, and beyond that, we've gained hundreds and hundreds of email list subscribers from Instagram Reels, and it's just been a game changer for the business. And so if you're wondering a little bit more about those strategies and how to get started with that today, we'll put a link in the description, in the show notes. You can check that out. And yeah, I hope this episode was helpful. If you have any questions about what we are doing to market on social media and why we're doing it, feel free to drop a comment on YouTube, or you can always email us, podcast@stephaniecase.com. We would be more than happy to answer any questions that you have or keep it in mind for future content that we are creating. And yeah, thank you guys for being here, and I will see you guys again in next week's episode on Tuesday. Bye guys.